Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, DNS hijacking takes down the New York Times, Twitter, and more. We'll explain what happened. Plus, researchers have bypassed Dropbox's authentication, a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 125 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on August 29th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com, Ting.com, and UnitySync from Directory Wizards. I'll tell you more about all three of those as the show goes on. And, of course, our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. Go check it out. My name is Chris. And joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
You know what, Alan? I had this weird moment this morning when I looked down at the lower third, and I said, 175. No way. Oh, 125.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of things going by really fast, though. I cannot believe it's almost September. That's totally nuts.
Yeah. Well, the ridiculous thing is we were talking, I think it was Tuesday night, next week's episode will mark 6 months since we did the 100th episode in the studio.
That is wild.
It's been 6 months already?
You've been doing a lot of things. You've been doing a lot of things in particular.
Yes.
Not only have you been traveling a lot, but you might have another show up your sleeve, too.
Yes. I tried to start another podcast yesterday.
You ran into that age-old problem of somebody having babies.
Yeah.
That's
all my co-hosts seem to be having babies.
You know what's interesting? Your co-hosts are also named Chris.
Yeah. I have Chris and then Chris with a K.
Yeah.
And they can't seem to get their babies in sync.
And it's like his third one, too. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah. I don't know what these Chris's are thinking. So Alan has been working behind the scenes for a while now on a new BSD podcast.
It's been about a month. It came up in the chat room when we were trying to do an episode of TechSNAP.
Yeah.
Somebody kept recommending, do a BSD show, do a BSD show.
Oh, no.
At first, for the first year of people saying that, I was like, there's not enough stuff.
Yeah.
And then as I got more involved and saw the amount of stuff that's actually going on, I was like, you know what? There is enough stuff.
There is, yeah.
But I don't have time to do the show.
Right, yeah. Right.
And then it was like, well, who's going to help me? And then a bunch of people volunteered. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, in fact, you've got a little crew going. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
You guys have already got a website set up. You've got some...
I did all that.
You did all of the website, Alan?
Yeah.
Wow. Good work,
Well, other people are contributing now, but I did the original work.
Well, so, folks, you can check it out at bsdnow.tv. And, Alan, you haven't actually said who your co-host is.
Yes, my co-host will be Chris Moore, who's the guy that started PCBSD.
Yeah.
And he's also, goes to, almost every BSD or Linux conference everywhere, and promotes PCBSD.
You've been going to a lot of conferences too. Do you think that's going to be integrated into the show in some regard?
Probably. For example, we're both going to be at EuroBSDCon in Malta at the end of September.
Oh.
And since we'll both be there, that week's episode will likely come from there.
Yeah, and maybe you can get some interviews or something like that. Who knows?
It won't be at the regular time.
Right.
Because I won't be there yet.
Well, yeah, it's going to be one of those things.
I'll actually be on a plane at that time. But we will have an episode from that week that will feature something. Probably from the Dev Summit, because we'll be much, much too busy during the actual conference. So
BSD now has been added to the Jupiter Broadcasting calendar. Just go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar, and you can see when BSD now is live. And of course, it'll be available for download. It'll show up in the All Shows RSS feed if you've already got that, if you already subscribed to that. And then we'll have an RSS feed, separate feeds, just for that show, too. So, gosh, that's exciting.
And yesterday I recorded our first interview with Peter Hessler of the OpenBSD project.
Right. So it's not just all free BSD.
No, it won't be at all.
And you were actually kind of on target to have episode 1 done yesterday, but with Chris's wife going into labor, that's been pushed. Now they're targeting...
In the morning.
Yeah.
See, your wife did it, the night before?
Yeah, for TechSNAP. We scheduled it just for TechSNAP. Yeah.
So that you'll be all wrapped up just in time for TechSNAP.
Well, see, this is because I've been doing this for a few
years. His wife
years.
was a little late.
She'll get the hang of it after you do it. No, don't worry. You give it about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of doing the BSD Now podcast, she'll have it. The next kid at that point in time, be right on time. So there was going to be out this week, but so now they're scheduled to do it live next Wednesday if everything works out and Chris's family situation's ready for it. And, of course, we'll let you guys know here in the TechSNAP program when the first episode's out. So just stay tuned to TechSNAP. I am so looking forward to it. I can't even tell you. And it's going to be fun for me because I'm not on it. And so I can actually watch one of our shows I'm not in. Because I hate watching myself.
Yeah, well, that's the weird thing. It's like I've almost never watched an episode of TechSNAP because I know what happened. And so, yeah, for you, it'll be like, hey, look, a show that I'm not in. That
and then I'm interested in, too, which is really cool. So, all right, Alan. Well, why don't we start with sort of a big story that is playing one small part in the overall Syria story, and that is the Syrian Electronic Army, if I have it right, got a hold of some DNS accounts, made life horrible for the New York Times and a few other sites for a few hours, right?
Quite a few other sites, actually, yes.
So what happened?
A number of high-profile domains were taken completely offline or otherwise disturbed on Tuesday. Attackers claiming to be part of the Syrian Electronic Army hacked the domain name registrar Melbourne IT and changed the WHOIS records for a number of domains, including nytimes.com, huffingtonpost.com and .co.uk, mapquest.com, patch.com, starbucks.com, TechCrunch, TweetDeck, twimg.com, which is Twitter's subdomain they use for images. So any image posted on Twitter at all, right? They don't let you host your own images anymore. They force it to go through their thing. Vine.co and T.co. T.co being Twitter's URL shortener. That one in particular, they could have hijacked all that traffic and redirected to their site or to, again, like we talked when they took over the Washington Post with nytimes.com, huffingtonpost.com, and T.co. The amount of traffic they could have redirected to malicious malware, the number of people they could have infected, it could have been the biggest botnet ever. Like the biggest botnet created in a single day.
Wow, no kidding.
Just from infecting people going to nytimes.com, Huffington Post, TechCrunch, and T.co, which would be every URL linked on Twitter anywhere.
You know, what's interesting, you've kind of just underlined and illustrated how little they actually did with really any of these hacks. Like they've just...
Yeah, like mostly they went in and changed the WHOIS records so that the domains all said that they were owned by the Syrian Electronic Army.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
and it messed with the DNS a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they had been malicious, and if they were after more than just attention, they could have done tremendous damage, not only to the reputation of the sites, but to everybody who went to those sites.
Yeah.
It's not clear whether they managed to hack the individual accounts of those people, although it seems unlikely with just the breadth and the fact that they targeted these specific sites. It seems like they've somehow got into the Melbourne IT system and had access to any account they wanted, and they just went after the high profile.
We don't know how they did that, right? And they're supposed to be kind of regarded for having well-secured systems, right? Isn't that, like, I read that
about
an
accredited registrar, but that's about all I know.
I read that they supposedly have a good reputation, but I'm not sure.
Well, I would imagine there's a reason why Twitter chose them as their domain name registrar.
Yeah.
And same with New York Times and TweetDeck and so on.
Yeah.
TechCrunch. Because when I had heard of them a couple times before, I was like, why would I choose a registrar in Australia? Although I don't think they're actually in Australia. But,
well, I love Australia. What's wrong with Australia?
Right, but if I was going to pick a domain name registrar, I would probably pick a Canadian one or something. Right?
I was just trying to get you in trouble with the Aussies.
Right. It's like but anyway. You know, originally I picked my first domain name registrar based on the fact that they would take a money order because I wasn't old enough to use a credit card yet.
Yeah.
Well, I don't use them anymore, but anyway.
That's old school.
Yeah. So among the effects for the others, the Twitter image one is the one I noticed first because a friend posted an image on Twitter and I couldn't see it. I was like, wow, Twitter must be down, stupid Twitter.
Yeah.
And then somebody else tweeted about Twitter's official comment on the DNS problem.
Oh.
But being a goof, this particular person had tweeted a screenshot of the tweet. I think probably from their phone or something, right? So it didn't load.
Yeah.
And they had no link to the actual story.
How ironic is that?
Or the tweet.
That is very ironic.
And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. So now I know there is a problem with Twitter's DNS, but I don't know what it is or why.
Yep.
And eventually this story came up, and I was like, all right, TechSNAP.
There you go. Now, at the time, was there speculation it was affecting Steam, too?
No, Steam, that was scheduled maintenance.
Oh, okay. Just around that same time.
Which they've done twice in a row in the middle of my gaming. Because I get to, on non-Thursdays, I get to play from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m.
On non-Thursdays? Does that mean every day but Thursday?
Yes. That's the window between when some of the people I play with get home from work and before some of the people I play with have to leave for work. We have this small window from 6 until 8 to play our couple of turns of Civ 5. And
I didn't know you got second Civ 5.
I know. Evil.
Yeah.
I blame the person who bought it for me and gifted it to me on Steam during the summer sale. Anyway, the downtime that Valve has been scheduling has been at 7 p.m.
Oh.
Right in smack dab in the middle of our time. And they did it on I think it was Tuesday. And apparently they didn't finish all the maintenance, so they scheduled the second one for the next day at the same time.
They should know better than that.
Well, they picked the time based on when they're still going to be in their office.
Right.
It's like 4 p.m. Pacific. It's like, why not do it at like noon Pacific?
Right.
And then it will be done by time, like 4 p.m. Pacific sounds like the time when people on the West Coast would be, like kids were getting home from school and getting ready to play a game.
They probably figured, Yeah, I don't know why.
But like, I understand the concept of doing it during business hours so that all their staff are on hand to deal with it.
Yeah.
But 4 p.m. seems like everybody just wants to go home.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with Amazon or with maintenances that are, we didn't quite finish, we'll have to do it again tomorrow. Because they don't, rather than stay and finish, they're like, I'm going home. It's the end of the day.
Yep.
Anyway, so after the New York Times had a recent outage where they screwed up, this time it wasn't their fault.
Right, it's funny because a lot of people jump on there like, I wonder if this is related. Maybe they got hacked before. Maybe they lied. It's like, no, this is not related.
So the New York Times reports that their website went down sometime after 3 p.m. Once service was restored, the hackers quickly disrupted the site again shortly after 6 p.m.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then in the end, it kind of brings up into question the viability of DNSSEC, right? So DNSSEC is this concept of the authoritative domain, the authoritative DNS server will sign the response saying, this is legitimately from this domain. It's not some other server lying and saying, right? It prevents man-in-the-middle attacks based on DNS.
Right.
Right, because if you're using, if you remember, there was that that big virus that the FBI was hosting a server to fix for a while, and there was all this hubbub when they were going to shut it down, saying the FBI was going to shut off people's internet.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, so the way that worked was the evil DNS server would return the wrong IP address when you tried to look up Google or PayPal or Netflix, right? And it would try to steal your credit card. So to prevent that, the idea would be that Google and PayPal and Netflix would sign their DNS responses with a private key. And then you would use a public key to verify that the response was valid, right? And the idea was they would publish the right public key as part of the WHOIS record for the domain, the same way you publish the list of name servers. The problem is, if people can just hack your domain name registrar, they could replace the DNSSEC with a different public key that would validate invalid records. Right? So it's kind of like, well, DNSSEC only works if you trust that the information published by the domain name registrar is correct, which only works if they haven't been compromised.
Right. All right. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, there's a story that I never got to. I meant to do it a couple of weeks ago about a way to replace the SSL certificate authority infrastructure by publishing the correct public key for your certificate as a TXT record in DNS and then signing it with DNSSEC. Although, that too would suffer from this problem. But anyway, we'll have to explain that concept another week when I have time.
I would look forward to that. Look forward to that.
It'll be a cool story.
Hey, I think I was going to ask you at the top of the show, you mentioned that you have a Linux shirt on, but I didn't actually ask you what the Linux shirt was.
Right. Yes. You remember the other week we talked a little bit about Red Hat's special software repo where they have newer versions and stuff, and we again mentioned IUS community.
Yeah.
Which is, that says,
check that out. They sent you a shirt?
Yes. So iOS Community, again, is that site for Red Hat Enterprise Linux or CentOS that provides newer versions of common software that you need to run web apps like Python, Ruby, PHP, MySQL, etc. Right? Because the default version of MySQL in Red Hat Enterprise Linux is 5.1. And, you might want new features like 5.5 and 5.6 have.
Yeah.
So they have this, a Red Hat Yum repo that has all that stuff in it. And it's kind of gives you something semi-official that you can use rather than just some random guy's repo or something.
Which is a lifesaver for a lot of IT guys out there.
Yes, and so now after years of doing this, Red Hat's kind of made their own thing for Red Hat subscribers, but iOS Community continues to do theirs for
Cent and
free
Scientific.
for everybody.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it works for Scientific Linux, CentOS, even Red Hat Enterprise Linux if you don't have a subscription that gives you access to the special Red Hat one.
I was in a
and also, the iOS one will be even more up-to-date than the Red Hat one because they're only planning to update it like once every 8 months or something like that.
I was in a really, really tight spot once with a CentOS box. I had a very vulnerable version of PHP, and I was going to be under an audit. And so, nice. Look at that. Oh, it's got the Rackspace logo on there, too. So wait, what is that a listing of on the back? That's nice.
It's actually the text output of the command yum install PHP 5.4 MySQL 5.5 Python 3.6 or whatever.
I took an old Red Hat machine that had not, and I normally would not have done this, but I was in a really bad spot, and I literally was able to graft on the community repos onto this old Red Hat Enterprise box and upgrade it to a much more current, essentially CentOS installation. Like, just to describe, like, the compatibility between CentOS and Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I don't know if you can. I'm not
it's
sure.
Literally the same thing, except for without the subscription.
So like, I was able to on this box switch over to these repos, do a Yum update, and bring the whole system up to date, even though it hadn't been upgraded because the Red Hat Enterprise subscription service had the subscription had ended years ago. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yes, and they appreciated the advertising on TechSNAP, so they sent me a T-shirt.
Well, very nice of them.
Yes.
All right. Well, speaking of new features and things I like quite a lot, I'd like to thank our first sponsor this week, and that is Ting.com. If you go to TechSNAP.Ting.com, you're going to hit the brand new refreshed landing page for the TechSNAP program.
Oh, they have a new one, eh?
Yeah, it looks really nice. 98% of people who switch to Ting would save money. Check this out. They've got a really great new page, but I want to tell you a little bit about Ting because I have a really good idea. If you've been thinking about Ting and you need some mobile data, stay tuned. I've got a solution for you. So one of the neat things that really makes Ting stand out is the way they do their billing. They just charge you for what you end up using. So you break out your rates by minutes, text message, and megabytes. They'll bill you at the end of the month for what you end up using. So if you got a month where you don't really use a phone very much, you don't end up paying into this big bucket of minutes, into this prepaid amount of money for a plan that you might not even use 20% of the minutes that month. If you think about that, that's kind of a big scam, and Ting is going to change all of that up. And I wanted to make a suggestion. If you've been thinking about doing this, go over to go to TechSNAP.Ting.com, click on the devices, go to the Used tab, and then look what they've got right here. The Sierra Overdrive Pro, $28, mobile hotspot. You pay for what you use. So you're not into some sort of like $40 a month contract or $60 a month, whatever these MiFi hotspot things are that the other guys have. This is, you pay $28 for the device. It's $6 a month for the line, and then after that, you only pay for what you use. This is a great way to have data on demand when you need it, and these little Overdrive Pros are awesome. They're little champs. Now, this one right here is a 3G device. If you actually happen to be in a neighborhood like mine that has WiMAX, it's actually pretty great. You get broadband speeds on WiMAX. I mean, WiMAX, it never really kind of took off because LTE was sort of the dominant standard. But the places that do have WiMAX, if you got it in your area and you don't have a phone that uses it, grab this. Grab this and get 4G speeds on the go. And if you just don't use it that month, you're not a big deal. You're out $6. It's not a big deal. So go over to TechSNAP.Ting.com, go to the Used Devices tab on their devices area, and click on the Overdrive Pro. They've also got that personal shopper there. If you'd like to find them a refurb device for you, if you want to get into Ting real cheap, you can do that. Or you can always go get one of their great devices, like the HTC One, which I've got right here in my pocket. I love the HTC One. The great thing, and I bet you're a podcast listener if you're listening to our show, or if you're an audiobook listener, or even like Pandora, the HTC One speakers are absolutely, totally, and completely incredible. They are as good as a standalone, like a speaker set. Like I will play. Let's see if I can. A new episode is out. Let me just download that right now. All right. So for example, here is a mission log episode. I'm going to go in here and listen to. Here, I'll turn it up. Yeah, and go back here. Doesn't that sound awesome?
Mission log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast.
So it's got 2 stereo speakers. So if you need a really good podcasting phone or mobile radio or internet radio, the speakers on this thing are as good as getting like an external Bluetooth speaker box. I really love this phone. And you compare it. Oh man, they turned on LTE in my neighborhood too. It is so awesome when you combine the HTC One with Ting and LTE. It will blow your mind what is possible. These things actually start to feel like real computers.
More than all that, the reason you should switch to Ting is they have this crowd of people on the landing page.
Yeah.
And the guy up front has a big Unix beard.
You're totally right. Look at that. Look, and actually, he's kind of got my hair going too a little bit. Like if I grew it out,
have your hair.
Yeah, if I grew it out, that guy's me. If I let my beard and lost a few pounds too. But,
yeah. Well, it's an art, right?
Right. It's an artistic. I like to think that's me. I like to think that.
But I also love they have these little reasons at the bottom. It's like people love Ting. You're people, therefore you should love Ting.
Yeah, you are people. All right. Well, I won't talk about.
Did you know that you are people?
I think I am. I won't talk about their amazing dashboard or their fantastic app that works on tablets or
the fact that you
smartphones.
call them and you don't wait on hold, you actually talk to a person.
That's great too. That's great too.
That was my favorite thing about my ISP before they got bought by a big national.
Back when they were indie.
Evil, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
The fact you call it was like ring ring hello.
Yeah.
It's like
and they could actually fix the problem.
A person.
Yeah.
Hello. I had my phone on speakerphone and I had the dial pad up so I could get through your stupid menu.
Yeah.
And you didn't have one.
Yep.
You make me so happy.
It is very nice, especially if you put a family member or friends on it. So go to techsnap.ting.com, save $25 off your first device. Or if you bring your own device, you're going to save $25 off your first month. And if you're like me, that'll probably almost cover your entire first month for free. So if you go get that Overdrive Pro,
yeah, that's the other
deal.
thing.
At $28, you can probably get that Overdrive.
With a regular cell phone company, I'd be worried to tell my mom if my mother was having a problem. I'd be worried to tell her to just call them because I'm almost absolutely sure they would somehow sell her something.
Yeah. Oh, you need a new phone, man. Yeah.
Or extend her contract by a year or something. And with Ting, you're not going to have that because they don't even have contracts.
So no contracts, no early termination fees. And if you use techsnap.ting.com, you could probably grab that Overdrive Pro for. I mean, if you take $25 off that, it's like after shipping and stuff, it's probably going to cost you like $5-10. That's a really great deal. And then it's $6 a month after that, and you just pay for what you use. And it's a slam dunk. If you've got WiMAX in your area, do this. That's a total must-do. So thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Go to techsnap.ting.com. We love those guys. Big fans of Ting. All right, Alan, so I haven't managed to get off my butt with Dropbox yet. I'm still using it. Now I see a story that the Dropbox authentication system can be bypassed. I'm freaking out. I'm going to go panic. Talk me down, Alan. What's going on?
Well, I'm not going to talk you down, but anyway. 2 researchers published a paper at Usenix about defeating security in Dropbox. So Dhiru Kolia of OpenWall and the University of British Columbia in Canada, and Przemysław Wenshin of Code Painters in Warsaw, Poland, released their paper at Usenix. And I have a link to the paper in the show notes here. The title is actually, the title. Looking Inside the Dropbox is the name of their paper. The research is not entirely focused on Dropbox. The general techniques they use would work against a number of other cloud services and applications. They say, these techniques are generic enough, we believe, would aid in future software development, testing, and security research. So it's partly just a general information paper, but they use Dropbox as their example and tear it apart. The work also includes a number of positive side effects. In particular, their work reveals the internal API used by the Dropbox clients and makes it fairly straightforward to write a portable open source Dropbox client.
So, and this was obfuscated Python code too, which was kind of like a big deal, right?
So they managed to decompile Python and then work around a lot of the obfuscation to actually basically examine some of the source code of the Dropbox client. so that they could figure out how it was doing some of its security and then be able to poke holes in it, since a lot of the security in this case was by obscurity rather than being a secure system.
Oh, that always works so well.
And they say, additionally, we show how to bypass Dropbox's two-factor authentication and gain access to a user's data. So the attack involves discovering the host ID value, which is a unique value Dropbox assigns to a machine when you authenticate it with Dropbox, the client. This used to be stored in an unencrypted SQLite database, and that we actually talked about that on the very first episode of TechSNAP, about how if you managed to steal that ID, you could gain access to somebody's Dropbox files even after they changed their password.
Right.
So now that data is actually an encrypted SQLite database. However, the various bits of information they use to make up the key for the encryption are stored on your computer. There's no way around that. That's right, because the client needs to be able to have the key. So the information for the key has to be on your computer somewhere. So it was all obscurity, and so they managed to figure it out so they could get access to that host ID value.
Not surprising, that's the weak point.
Yeah. Since the original thing 2.5 years ago now for Dropbox, they've added this second value, the host int, which is seems to be some unique ID number assigned to you by Dropbox that seems to never change. That second variable, you can find out what it is if you know the first one. So if you know your host ID, you can post to client.dropbox.com/register_host, send your host ID, and it'll send you back what your host INT number is.
And it never changes.
Right. So until the very latest version of Dropbox that just came out that adds a bunch of extra obfuscation and a random nonce to the process, which the researchers are working on cracking now, it was actually possible if you knew the host ID and the host int to post to a special URL, dropbox.com/tray_login, and it would let you log in without a username, password, or the two-factor authentication. The point of this feature is actually when you have the Dropbox client open, if you right-click on the tray icon and launch the Dropbox website, it would use the authentication that desktop client has to log you in, right? Because you're on your computer, you don't need a username and password.
So could I then somehow hack in Dropbox functionality into an app if I knew that the person had that on their computer? I could start talking to the Dropbox service?
Well, if you know the host ID and host int, you can log into their website and do whatever you want on the Dropbox account, including change their password, probably.
Okay.
Although changing their password probably requires their old password. So that wouldn't necessarily let you just change the password. But.
Yeah. Okay. So, and?
So the newest version of the Dropbox client works around this, but in such a way that the researchers think they'll be able to work around the workaround shortly.
Yeah, and so I was reading this, and they were speculating, too, that maybe with this kind of thing, we'll see a open source Dropbox client. They say, based on the findings in earlier sections, it's straightforward to write an open source Dropbox client. The following code snippet shows how to fetch a list of files stored in a Dropbox account. And I ask you, Alan, can you think, what's even from a business standpoint, why doesn't Dropbox have an open source client? Because then I, as a customer, could have a little more faith in what's happening there. It doesn't solve the storage problem.
A couple things. So the researchers kind of hoping the fact that somebody could build one now with the information these researchers have done, that Dropbox will just open source it. Because I think part of the reason not is it would expose some of the fundamental flaws in their security system. Just because they haven't thought of a better way to solve the problem doesn't mean there isn't a better way.
Yeah.
And I think an open source client would help with that, although at the same time, it would make it easier for someone when they find an exploit like this to leverage it.
So I was also surprised, I don't know why, I guess now thinking about it, but I was also surprised to learn it was a Python app. I don't know. I guess it's a multi-platform.
Yeah, it's an easy, that's why the first BitTorrent client was in Python as well.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So what you're saying is, Chris, get rid of Dropbox.
Possibly. And so their whole paper is there, and it includes a lot of detail, and a lot of it is not really specific to Dropbox, including if you want to decompile any Python app and why security by obfuscating code isn't good enough, and some of the tricks that Dropbox used to hide their code and so on.
Now they haven't like gone and like released like code on how to do this, right? Or have they? Like, I mean, is this something that we have to worry about? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All the details are in the research paper. If somebody wanted to, they could probably figure it out. They did release a Metasploit module for finding that host int number.
Yeah.
You can also find it via the way Dropbox talks over a LAN. So if you're on the LAN with somebody that's using Dropbox, you using a Metasploit module and a EtherCap thing they wrote, you could pick up the host ID or host int of other Dropbox users on your LAN, which might be really interesting to do at a university. Of course, that's only one of the two values you need to get into an account still.
Yeah, that's true. Like in a school setting.
That's one step closer.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have a BitTorrent sync story later in the roundup today. So I'll save that for that. All right, well, any other thoughts on that one? No?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. All right, so it seems like about every 5 or 10 episodes, you give me another reason to move off to Dropbox, and it's just so damn handy, Alan. Like, I sent you links from it just like on Tuesday. Here's a couple of links. Just pull it right out of my Dropbox. Very easy to do that. And a lot of the other systems do have some capacity for that. Yeah. But Dropbox is sort of... And the other thing that keeps pulling me back to Dropbox is the mobile support. They've got tons of apps integrate with it, note-taking applications, all this kind of stuff integrate in with Dropbox, make it real easy. So I guess the same reasons why I still use a lot of services, because of integration. Speaking of services, I love our second sponsor for today's episode of the TechSNAP program, GoDaddy. GoDaddy.com has the Tech249 code still going, although I'm not sure. I will get word soon. But if you want a .com for $2.49, I can't guarantee after August it'll still be available. So if you're listening to this now, act quick. Go to GoDaddy.com. Yes. In fact, if you use the link in our show notes, you can check out via their new express pathway. Zoom, like greased lightning. You click that link, you get in there, pow, pow, buy what you want, you're out. And when you use that link, it auto-tags your shopping session with Tech249, so you automatically get that .com for $2.49. Additional .coms, $9.99. Still a great deal. Incredible deal, really, if you think about it. Kind of blows my mind. That's not the only thing we've got available from GoDaddy. If you're getting yourself something nice, maybe you're getting a few things, it's a new order, something like that, use our code GO32OFF3. GO32OFF3 takes 32% off your entire order. That's a great deal, especially if you're getting some hosting, a few other things.
Or a .tv for a new podcast or whatever.
Right, perhaps a BSDnow.tv type domain. Yeah, absolutely. So Tech249 and Go32OFF3 are the codes you want to remember when you're shopping over at GoDaddy.com, and use that link in our show notes to get the express pathway. Really, a big thanks to GoDaddy for giving us that great deal, and thanks to you guys for using that, so that way they keep coming back and keep giving us those great deals. The only reason we get them is because you guys take advantage of them. So thanks to GoDaddy, thanks to you guys for supporting the TechSNAP program. Oh, Alan, I have a few great ideas for some .coms I'm going to be purchasing soon. So there was a sort of even though the Syria news has sort of dominated the headlines, there was an NSA story that I saw pop up over the last couple of days, and I thought, is this a lot of hyperbole around him using sudo? I mean, like, what is going on here? But
I don't know how much of their system is Unix based. But
yeah, maybe, who knows? But this was a post that I saw on the Washington Post, and we got one here for NBC News. That Snowden impersonated NSA officials to get access to documents and data.
Yeah,
right?
which is kind of like using SU or sudo.
Yeah.
Or in this particular case, it's actually the NSA has their own application called NSANet, which is their intranet system. And basically, different users have different access levels based on their security clearance, like top secret, which is actually pretty generic. Basically, everybody who works at a contractor for the NSA basically has top secret. Which is the most interesting thing that a lot of people still don't understand is that Edward Snowden did not work for the NSA. He worked for a contractor called Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a defense contracting company. And he worked in Hawaii, and he had access as a sysadmin. And so in their application for the sysadmin, which makes they have the ability to impersonate a certain user. And that's how you debug a problem, right? I've actually built this feature into a number of my applications because a user reports a problem. I look at it as an admin, and I don't see the view my view is different. So by being able to become user X, I can see what they would see, right? And he basically used that so that he would see the files that were above his security clearance.
Uh-huh.
So by using the debugging feature or whatever, he was able to become, or to take over the profile of someone much higher up in the NSA who would actually have access to even more sensitive intelligence. And then using that, he could download it. The other thing is, normally users at the NSA are prevented by basically, I think it's actually like a Windows group policy from using external storage devices, like USB sticks.
Yep.
But because he had administrator privileges, he got around the
group policy. Yeah, he's probably a local admin or something.
Or a network admin.
Yeah, or domain admin.
From that, he was able to plug in a USB stick and save the estimated 20,000 documents, and then leave Hawaii and go to Hong Kong, and eventually onto Russia.
And then from that thumb drive to the world.
Yeah. So basically, by being a sysadmin, he was able to impersonate certain other people in the NSA. They're not sure who yet. They're actually looking at the access logs and trying to find out if someone was on vacation or something and they suddenly were accessing files. They don't know which people Snowden might have impersonated yet. It seems like there should be a more verbose law, right? If administrator is becoming some user, that should kind of be logged very explicitly.
One of the things,
especially files they access as that person.
Sort of a parallel story to all this NSA stuff that's been extremely disappointing as a U.S. citizen is recently it came out there's been 56,000 violations over the last 3 years of NSA employees violating United States citizens' private information. And though that 56,000 number was only after either self-reported or some polygraph tests. Like, there's no actual system in place that monitors for abuse, logs, and reports it. It's all human-powered. So it wouldn't surprise me that they have crappy security on the auditing end for access,
a lot of systems that are built kind of inherently trust anybody with administrator access completely.
Right.
And that might not necessarily be the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, how do you...
In this case, it seems like they had a lot of people that had administrator access. You know, especially in this case, people that work for a contractor. It seems, actually, what this makes me think is that these guys should have had a Fudu. I think we've talked about that before. It's a device that a FreeBSD developer makes, and it's specifically for monitoring your contractors. Right? So you don't give your contractors the root password or the administrator password for your Windows machines. They connect to the Fudu, which is an auditing device.
Yeah.
And it then goes on and connects to your server and logs in as administrator or root. And it logs everything they do. Right? So even if they come in and then sue to some other user, so the audit logs on your individual servers would say that user X did it. Your Fudu knows it was this contractor that did it.
Right.
And it's all isolated with capsicums, so the Fudu box itself, if someone manages to find an exploit for OpenSSH or something, the SSH can't escape out of the capsicum sandbox. And it's all ZFS on top of AES-NI-based encryption.
So this is like a hardware thing?
Yeah, it's a hardware device that you put between your network and your contractors, and it audits and logs everything the contractor does.
That's scary.
So you can go back and play back their SSH session and watch it.
Right, yeah.
After the fact, right? You don't have time to monitor what every contractor's doing. But when something goes wrong, you can go back and be like, hey, this contractor did it.
Was the number something like Booz Allen? Or no, the NSA employs like 70,000 contractors or something like that for this project?
Yeah.
70,000. Think about that. Think about how many of them have access to this. And he was one of them.
Exactly. And there's no clear audit trail. That's why they're basically having to do forensic analysis and trying to find correlations between, so this user accessed something when they weren't at their computer, so maybe that was Snowden, or maybe it was someone else.
And now they're saying...
And they don't have the kind of logging they need, whereas if they had a Fudu...
They're saying that they think that before Snowden was... I'm not sure exactly the timeline, because I know that he worked for the CIA before he worked for Booz Allen. I don't know... At some point, he was also working for Dell as a tech support, and Dell was providing tech support to the NSA, and supposedly he got access as a Dell contractor to documents as well. Did you see that story?
No.
So he was there as a Dell rep, and the first documents he collected before he even worked for Booz Allen, he was doing it as a Dell employee. So it seems to me like a systemic problem because two different companies, this guy comes in as a contractor and is able to get classified documents. And you got to wonder, like, if you're a certain type of contractor, just boom, do you get domain admin rights? Boom, you get root access. Have at it, Hosk. Have a good time. It kind of makes you wonder. And then to not have a proper audit framework in place, well, maybe our chat room is full of a bunch of tinfoil nut jobs, but I kind of agree with him. It almost seems intentional. If you have your own NSA net with its own authentication system and its own mechanisms, then it would be a conscious decision not to put auditing spots in those different points in the system. And you got to wonder why that would be. Now, that is stretching it, but you do have to kind of wonder if maybe there's a lack of auditing for a particular reason. And it's extremely frustrating. And now you see what they're basically coming out and saying is they have no idea what Snowden got access to. They're not
yes, or who he impersonated or what documents he had access to.
How can you even know if you don't know who he did it as? You'd have to know. So first of all, you got to figure out who he did it as. And then they're probably just going to say, well, that account has access to anything. So they'll just assume worst case scenario and say he got everything that person could have had access to.
Yeah, so basically their assumption that he could have had access to anything that was in the NSA net at all is correct, and all this forensic analysis isn't going to do them much good.
Right. Gets me all worked up, Alan. Gets my hands going.
And, so one former intelligence official put it as, the damage on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 12. But really, if their security was on a scale of 1 to 10, it would have been absolute 0. It's like minus 300 or something like that. But the scariest quote came from some other former U.S. official with specific knowledge of this case. Every day they are learning how brilliant Snowden was. This is why we don't hire brilliant people for jobs like this. We hire smart people. Brilliant people get you in trouble.
Oh!
They're saying don't hire really smart people to be your sysadmins because they're smarter than you.
That's smartest, is what that is. They're being smartest. I don't know. They're being. I got nothing.
Yeah, anti-intellectual.
I guess so.
Yeah, but really, it's like, do you want the government populated by people that aren't considered brilliant? It's like we're going to purposely only hire people that are considered mediocre because they probably won't be able to pull off something like this.
I guess so. I guess what they're saying is you only want dumb people working for the government.
What they're saying is that they should have had some kind of peer review process.
Yeah.
Like the NSA net system should have something in place so that if you want to impersonate someone with a higher security clearance than you require 1 or 2 other administrators to sign off on it.
Si,
or something.
senor.
Right?
Si, senor.
Or someone with that level security clearance has to stand over your shoulder the whole time.
I do agree that is how you fix it. The problem I have with that is
this kind of shit wouldn't happen at a bank. Right? At a bank, they lock their computer the second they stand up from their desk. When you want to override something on an account, the manager has to come and type in a password, right? They don't just let any bank employee override something. Banks have their own security problems, but this type of thing wouldn't happen, right? If a bunch of money was stolen from a bank, the bank wouldn't be like, we don't know which account he stole the money from.
Right. I guess the only problem, and I know it's whatever, but the problem I have with requiring, and this is what they're going to do. They've already said that Alexander already announced this, that they're going to have a sign-off process, like you just mentioned, where it takes 2 to do something, to get access to something. But I mean, not only is that a really good security maneuver and just probably a good idea in general, but it also has the nice, pleasant side benefit for the NSA of, I would imagine, severely limiting future whistleblowers, because now it'll take 2 guys.
Not always necessarily, though, because there's always been speculation that Snowden was working with 2 or 3 other people that might still be inside the NSA.
That would be interesting.
Right?
You'd think they'd sniff them out by now.
Originally, the speculation was based on the fact that he got access to documents he wouldn't have had access to, but we see how he did that, so maybe they're...
Yeah. No. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know they need to do it, I guess, and
it makes me think, something like the Fudo security appliance would have solved all the problems.
At one point, I'm kind of glad they had kind of a screwed up security infrastructure, because now we know a hell of a lot more than we knew before. So in some ways, it's this weird, like, I want them to fix it, but at the same time I don't, because...
Yes, as a security expert, you want security systems to be secure.
Yeah.
But as a citizen, you don't want the government to be able to keep their secrets that way.
Right, exactly. It's kind of a catch-22. So I guess we'll kind of I don't know if we're going to find out more. This seems like one of those stories we're never really going to get the total detail on, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. That's kind of a bummer. Sometimes, future details come out and you get to learn more, but sometimes you never really know. Maybe one day he'll write a book if he makes it.
Yep.
All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No.
All right, I would like to mention our third and final sponsor for this week's episode of the TechSNAP program, and that is UnitySync by Directory Wizards. Alan and I have been telling you about UnitySync for the month of August. Now, if you haven't caught up yet, I'll tell you a little bit about UnitySync and why you probably might be interested in it, especially if you're sitting in an IT department right now and you've got Data Island-anitis, as I like to call it. UnitySync is a UnitySync is a centralized service that synchronizes data between directories. The goal of UnitySync is to provide an organization with a unified view of your different data directories. UnitySync can scale from one small directory with just a few hundred objects to an enterprise scale consisting of hundreds of thousands of objects without requiring extensive training or installation configure time. I mean, we're talking super easy to use web UI. You load it on your Linux or Windows box. The binary is like under 5 megabytes. You toss it on there. You configure it all through the web interface. You set up the dry runs, the reporting, the templates, all that kind of stuff. It'll synchronize directories like if there's a data store out there, it'll synchronize it. You can synchronize like Active Directory. You can synchronize anything as crazy as GroupWise, Lotus Notes, Vue.ds, Sun1, iPlanet directories, even Zimbra. I love Zimbra. If you'd like to bring Active Directory and Zimbra together, if you've got applications, if you've got an application where the HR lady's updating something, or if you've merged with somebody, if you've got two different types of data that now need to be shared, UnitySync can solve this problem for you. It works fantastic with LDAP, but it can even manage things like LDIF and CSV files, SQL Server, Microsoft Access, Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, and all other types of databases that just use ODBC drivers. So if you've got an ODBC driver for it, you can point UnitySync at it. No scripting or programming is required. All of the attribute management is handled by an easy-to-use template system. However, there is a Python scripting interface if you want to get underneath it, and UnitySync does not require a database itself, so you're not getting strapped down with yet another set of information and data to have to manage.
Right, that always reminds me of that XKCD comic. There are 17 standards. We should just have one. There are now 18 standards.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you have all these databases, like, all right, we need to sync between these 3 databases or these 2 databases. It's like, all right, so we'll do that by creating yet another database.
Right, exactly. It gets ridiculous. And as somebody who has worked with, I'm not going to say people who are dumb, but they just are not necessarily tech savvy. When you can document a few things for them and throw a web UI their direction, say, if you need to check on the status of something, visit this URL, here's the bookmark. That is extremely empowering for just people that want to check on status for things, and also saves you time. That's one of the nice things about UnitySync, is this web interface is very clean, very straightforward, very snappy to use. I've been looking at UnitySync for a couple of months now, and was sort of reminiscing with Alan on air and off air how this would have solved my problem so many times. As a former contractor who came into a lot of places that merged between companies, and they had these directories they needed to keep between each other. Maybe it could be anything from their phone directory to their actual business application. But as a contractor, I saw that a lot. But working at the bank where I worked for 6 years, we merged with so many other banks, and every bank had their own directory, and I was scripting all of this. This is really where I got into scripting, was originally to solve this problem. And then it was my head. But with UnitySync, if you go over to derwiz.com, click on UnitySync, and then click on download. You can download a free trial of UnitySync. If you put in the code TECH, it'll extend your trial to 30 days instead of the regular 15. And that first year of maintenance will be free. So once you get it deployed and all set up, if you have some bumps, if you got some questions, they've got a great support. They've got a great staff. You can contact them. And a lot of times, they're available in our chat room during the shows, too. Not always. Sometimes life gets busy. But this is the kind of thing. They're a very nimble company who really understands technology and understands their audience. And they're a bunch of tech geeks like the rest of us, so they even hang out here in the chat room and chat with us from time to time. I really think this is a great product. And if you need to move data between directories, if it's just a single attribute or the entire directory, go to derwiz.com and click on UnitySync. Become the IT hero for your organization. This is going to make things a lot smoother. I know your pain. Okay, Alan. So, excuse me. We've gone through Dropbox. We've gone through Snowden. We've gone through the New York Times. I think it's time for the feedback. What do you think?
Yep.
All right, let's hit it. That means it's time. That right here. TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or pop in that contact link at the top of our website. Or you could start a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. So thanks to everybody who did that. Before we get to your questions, though, Alan has a little PSA about EuroBSD CAN.
Con.
I know.
CAN is the one for Canada.
I got to keep it mixed up or else I'm not consistent, Alan. So what is it?
EuroBSD Con is September 20...
20 math?
5th?
20.
Sorry, the conference is the 27th to the 29th.
Okay.
Or sorry, 28th and 29th, but the Dev Summit is the day before. So it's September 28th and 29th in Malta, which is a tiny vacation island near Italy. But if you register before September 1st, you save 20%. So hurry up and register to save money.
Do you eat hot dogs, Alan? Because if you do,
Okay.
no. I was going to say people could go there and have a hot dog with you, but...
I suppose. As part of the conference, there are organized dinners each night that you can, if you prepay for them during your registration. A bus will go from the conference venue to the dinners each night.
Screw the hot
and
dogs.
You can have dinner with me.
Nice.
Yes, we're going to nice restaurants.
Really? That's awesome. God, food
Yes.
eating. When a conference gets the food dialed in, I'm all about that.
Yes.
That's awesome. So we'll have a link to that in the feedback section of the show notes.
Yes. So anyway, yes. The conference is great. The number of people that are going to be there is insane.
Oh, yeah.
Just some quick highlights. The guy who invented Nginx will be there giving a talk about Nginx. Same for Varnish. Global Top 100 guy, Eric Pickup, will be there talking about using Nginx, Redis, PHP, and Node.js to power some of the top 100 sites on the internet. Scott Long and Alistair Crooks from Netflix will be there talking about how Netflix now delivers 30% of all internet traffic in the US from FreeBSD. There'll be a talk about Postgres. Matthew Ahrens, one of the founding members of ZFS, will be there talking about the future of ZFS on Illumos. And joining him will be Martin Matruska and talking about ZFS on FreeBSD. Cisco's data center guy, Lyndon Knoll, will be there giving a talk about security and appliances and applications with Cisco. Warner Loesch will be giving a talk about high-speed flash storage, SSDs and going beyond SSDs and actually NAND flash, talking directly to the flash instead of having that flash translation layer.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be a talk about 40 gigabit network stacks, doing more than 700,000 IOPS per second with even just desktop SATA drives using ZFS and so on. 64-bit ARM, NFS v4. Theodore Rat will be giving a talk about OpenBSD and solving the year 2038 problem before it's too late.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And in total, there will be 43 talks in 3 tracks spread over the 2 days. So if you manage to find a time when there's not at least 2 talks you want to see at the same time, then you have very, very specific interests.
So it's one of those years where there's 2 things you wish you could split yourself into 2.
There's 3 at time. There's 3 at a time always. So that definitely means that you'll want to be in at least 2 places at once.
Wow.
So bring a friend so they can see the half that you can't.
Yeah. No kidding. All right, Al.
Also, this conference is kind of family-oriented as well. They have, during the days when the conference is going on and you'll be at the conference, there are actually organized activities for your family if you want to bring your family to, or even just your significant other with you to Malta.
Impressed.
Since it is a vacation island, why wouldn't you want to turn it into a whole vacation?
Good for them. Wow, that is really awesome. They got food figured out and family. They're everything
Yes.
like that's boom,
yes,
I'm done.
the Saturday night is actually a barbecue on the beach.
I should go to this. This sounds so awesome.
It is awesome.
Oh man.
It's in St. Julian's area. The conference itself is at the Hilton.
That is going to be a good time. What's the internet there like? Do you know? Can you do TechSNAP from there?
I
Probably
don't
not.
know.
You're going to be doing conference
We're going to try to do BSD
Yeah.
now from there.
Yeah.
TechSNAP will probably pre-record it.
Yeah, that's probably way easier. And then we'll have good audio quality. All right, Alan. Well, let's get to our first email. You ready?
Yep.
All right, this one comes in from Joanne. Joan. This is, hello, Chris and Alan. First of all, I want to thank you guys for such a great show. I discovered LAS in the beginning of the year, and since then I've watched LAS and TechSNAP every single week. On to my question. I recently set up a small free NAS server. The service I got running on it, I got CIFS, which is Samba Windows file sharing, transmission, BitTorrent sync.
the torrent. And
All
the
right.
torrent
Yep. A Firefly, which is a audio streamer, and a Mini DLNA. Everything is working perfectly. However, I'd like to be able to access the music server and the transmission web UI on the go. I've experimented a bit, and I have been able to do this by forwarding the relevant ports in my router firewall to the Firefly and transmission web UI, which are all running within jails. And in addition, I have set up a dynamic DNS using a free service with a local university that they provide to everyone living in my country. He says, he was wondering, number one, does using dynamic DNS pose any additional security threat? As I see it, there's only one thing that happens in that the request is forwarded to my IP. In theory, it would be easier for someone to DDoS me since they do not have to know my IP. But that's not going to happen anyway, right?
Right, yeah. So the dynamic DNS will follow you around, but that's the point. And if an attacker was going after your dynamic DNS, you could just get a different one.
Yeah, point it to a local host or something for a little bit.
My favorite when being attacked was always to redirect the attack to the FBI's mail server.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Oh my god.
Like their front page of their website is all like on a CDN and is going to absorb it and is used to take any attacks. But their mail server, on the other hand, that's likely to raise a bit of ire with somebody who might actually be empowered to start an investigation.
This day and age, if you're doing it from outside the country, they'll call you a cyber terrorist and they'll come after you. Okay, number two. I have a cheap Fisher-Price router, as Chris calls it. By forwarding the relevant ports to my FreeNAS jail, am I exposing myself to any security threats that I'm not thinking of? Even if the hacker knew my password, they're only going to be able to listen to my music and start some nasty torrents, right?
Right. Because those services are running in a jail, they're relatively okay. Generally, it has nothing to do with your router, right? Your router wouldn't... you either pass the port or you don't. The router doesn't really get involved other than that. So, yes, as long as you keep the plugins up to date, you should be okay. And again, they're in jail, so yes, they wouldn't be able to get access to anything that you didn't expose to the jail.
Yeah. And then his last question is, I plan to convert an old laptop into a firewall using pfSense. What kind of extra security do you think this will provide me than over his Fisher-Price router?
Not that much out of the box, really.
You're going to get additional
logging. You
logging.
get more access to, you get more verbose logging and stuff, and some of the default protections that are there are a little better. But in general, it's up to the firewall's rules you make, right? Either you pass the traffic to the FreeNAS box or you don't. So,
I mean, you can be
if you
more
tell the
picky.
firewall to allow it, then...
The pfSense rules, you can be a little more finicky about source and destination
actually,
OS.
Technically, with the fingerprinting in PF, with pfSense, you could say only Windows machines can connect over the network so that automated attacks might not be able to hit it or something. But.
Yeah. All right, well, David wrote in on a topic that we actually got a few hits on, so I just thought I'd cover it real quick. We talked about, remember how we had somebody who was trying to decide if they wanted to buy hardware for a pfSense router or a managed switch to do some testing?
Right.
David says, I've been catching up on last and TechSNAP in mass, so I'm not quite sure what episode this was, but when discussing pluggable TCP disciplines in BSD, Alan mentioned that the only way, this is a different email, only way to test behavior was to use it over the public internet. BSD has supported a feature called DummyNet for years, which provides traffic mangling capabilities, included introducing delay, jitter, packet loss, etc., to simulate essentially an unreliable frame relay and MPLS in the clouds. I've used a server running BSD with multiple Ethernet and CSU-DSU interfaces using PF to redirect the traffic through the DummyNet. This DummyNet server was placed between iOS-based routers and simulated the telco cloud with static mappings. Oh, that's interesting. Commercial options such as Xia provide similar capabilities with GUI interfaces. Lastly, you can model this behavior with a network modeling tool such as NS2 to NAM, or plus NAM, which uses object-oriented variant of TCL to programmatically define the network to be simulated. And I actually had, I thought I included another email that we got. I don't know if I did, actually.
But yeah, my point there was, I in fact used DummyNet for some traffic shaping because one of the things, while you can do it to like introduce fake packet loss or a certain, to like increase a ping, basically, like say hold each packet for 20 milliseconds to make the ping 20 milliseconds higher than it actually is.
Yeah.
The other thing it can do is set a specific bandwidth. You can say only, for connections that match this rule, put them through a pipe that's only 20 megabits out of my 100 megabits or whatever. And I actually do this for the rsync mirror of the PCBSD ISOs to prevent the mirrors from saturating all the bandwidth off of my master that all my other servers sync off of. The problem is if you creating a DummyNet that simulates a 100 megabit link on a gigabit behaves much differently than a physically limited to 100 megabit connection would, right? Because this will let it go right exactly to 100, and it's only
Right.
measured every so many microseconds, and
Right.
versus actually a 100 megabit Ethernet link.
Right. It's not
And
quite
so
the same. Yeah.
again, you can model a lot of the network behavior, but you can't tell 100% how it's going to behave until you're using it for real.
Good point.
And so software modeling is great, but when you get to the very last step, you still have to test it in a real environment because you're going to find things that the simulation didn't get right.
So this was the email I was thinking that kind of goes
Yes,
with.
DummyNet is great. I love it.
This kind of goes with it. Jason wrote in. He said regarding the smart managed switch decision from episode 124. I just wanted to suggest that the letter writer who was asking about getting a managed switch. We got a couple of people that recommended this, so I picked Jason's email from the pile. He said if he's not doing anything too heavy and he still wants to learn, I'd recommend picking up a full managed switch from. You might have heard of them, Alan, from Microtroc,
Microtech.
Microtech. I know I've never had to say the name out loud. And so they have these router firewalls, and you can pick them up for a really good price, and they've matured very nicely. It's fully managed, allowing you to make VLANs, port mirroring, etc., everything you could wish for learning, and it's under $50.
Yep.
So I'm going to pull up. They have a little.
I was actually hearing a story from a friend about in Latvia. Most of the internet there is actually they get like a crossbow and shoot an Ethernet cable between two buildings and set it up in like the elevator shaft on the roof of the building and put a microchip at each end and make like this. They like extend the internet through the country, but just by like manually wiring these buildings together.
Hey, gotta get it done somehow.
Yep.
Wow, this is really cool. Okay, so there you go. We have a link to his email, which has the link in it in the show notes.
Yeah. So a microchip is a nice thing. Although I'm not sure if you can replace their OS.
Yeah, you can. That was what one of the emails said. In fact, you can replace it with one that's almost identical to iOS, not the iOS, but iOS.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Socris box I linked is a regular atom that can easily run pfSense, which is nice as well.
All right. Noah writes in. He says, long-time listener, starting from episode number 1, but this is the first time he's written into the show. First, I'd like to thank you guys for all the hard work. It's helped me grow in my profession and my knowledge. I have wanted to deploy a failover cluster server using mostly System 76 hardware, using FreeNAS server, and 2 Ubuntu or BSD. Starting to play with that, thanks to Alan. He says, what I'm trying to achieve is to have a Windows Virtual as a fail-safe machine. I'm working on a personal project that requires a very little downtime. How would you achieve this? And number 2, is there a way you would deploy something like this? So how do you do a failover for something like that?
Right. It depends on the service. If you're just doing like HTTP or HTTPS, I like Nginx. When you define the upstream block, right, so it's going to sit on, it can be part of a pfSense or just whatever server. Or if you would have multiple Nginx servers that would be set up with something like CARP, so that they would all be sharing one IP address. And if one of them goes down, it fails over to the next one and the next one. But you can automate all that with 2 pfSenses instead if you don't want to set that up by hand. So you use multiple Nginxes as the front end, and so all the traffic goes in there, and then they route it to the back end. They can do load balancing, right? You can say, upstream 1 is this server and this port, and it gets a weight of 10. And then we have this second server that's not quite as fast. We'll give it a weight of 8. And then we have this other server that's a Windows VM, and you put the keyword backup, and it'll only use it if the other 2 are already down. Right? And you can also specify, so many errors within so many seconds means this server is down, not just a timeout. So right, if it starts throwing 503 errors and it throws 5 within 60 seconds,
right, then
that's considered down, and don't consider it back up again for 5 minutes until it's been solid for 5 minutes, or since it's been 5 minutes since the last error. That way you can let the server cool off of it, especially if it's 503s, right? If it's hitting its max concurrent connections, let it cool off some before you start hitting it again, so it's not flipping in and out of good status.
Yeah.
So that lets you route the traffic quite intelligently that way. Plus, you can do SSL offloading and lots of other stuff like that. And I've described before, if your backend is like Apache, having the Nginx in front means Apache can send all the data to the Nginx box, and then that worker can go on and do the next job, and the Nginx box takes care of writing that data out to the user who might have a slower connection than your connection over your LAN. So it lets you make those workers in the background more efficient.
That's a benefit.
Right? It was kind of like, think of it if you had like a pizza shop, right? If every time someone called an order of pizza, you assign one guy to do the whole process. He would take the order, build the pizza, put it in the oven, wait for it to finish, and take it out of the oven, and then get in his car and drive it to your house. Right? If you did that, or if you have one guy whose job is to make all the pizzas, and then he would just start putting them in a pile, and then the delivery guys would take them as they came and would deliver them. You know, it takes longer to deliver the pizza than it does to prep it, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so you can, yeah.
That's a good pizza analogy, Alan.
If it wasn't just HTTP, there's other things that can do things like that. There's like HTTP proxy, pound, balance. But also a really cool one that I've been following lately is called RelayD. It's by Rake Fleuter of the OpenBSD project, but also Martin Matruska is porting it to FreeBSD. It can do a bunch of stuff like that, and it also has this concept of socket splicing. Normally, like what Nginx is going to do is accept the connection on one socket and then make a second socket to the back end, and it passes the data back and forth. Well, in OpenBSD's kernel, Rake has put in this socket splicing, where once that's all been set up, the app, RelayD, can tell the kernel, see this socket and this socket, splice them together, and the kernel will take care of passing the traffic back and forth from then on. So user space gets completely out of the condition there.
Oh, performance.
Yeah, and that getting ported to FreeBSD and becoming part of pfSense would be amazing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that would make a great load balancing application.
That'd be a great feature for pfSense to acquire.
Yep. And RelayD has a bunch of other crazy features, including like SSL interception. If you wanted to do that, it can like generate new SSL certificates on the fly to use for those connections and stuff, to do all kinds of interesting things.
Very nice. Okay, there's a few options for you now. Good luck.
But yeah, really, if you want to email back for next week and tell us what type of protocol your application is based on, I can give you a better answer. Because you could use CARP to just load, to do failover at the IP level, or Nginx is great for doing it at HTTP level, or you can use something else like RelayD can do any application. Although it also has some cool stuff for doing specifically HTTP and HTTPS.
So while we're on the topic of monitoring, maybe we should answer this question. And I don't know, I kind of get the idea he's looking for something a little smaller scale, but we'll see. So this was submitted by BBG Murray's. Memories, I'm not sure. He says, hey guys, I'm going to send this email to Chris and Al, but then I thought, hey, I'll just post it here and get a discussion going. I'm looking for tools to monitor my computers and servers. I'm talking about a long-time monitoring, not the likes of like Top and IF Top. What's, something that gives me graphs. I'm not afraid to learn to use tools to get the job done. I just tried Google, but there's so much ad talk that I thought it'd be more efficient just to ask people who probably face this problem every day. Of course, Alan, I know you've got monitoring. We've talked about it a little bit. Are you just going to say Nagios, or is there other things out there too?
I use Nagios just because I learned it and I'm stubborn. But Zabbix is a little easier to set up probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Although it's harder to scale up. Right? Like if you're going to have like 10 servers, it's fine. But if you have 100, it can be a pain. Although if you invested the time, you could probably make it work nicely anyway. But it does the graphs kind of out of the box, whereas Nagios is actually an add-on. It's a separate app that you have to configure.
Yeah.
And it's like writing Perl regular expressions by hand. It's not quite as nice as Zabbix. But yeah, other people recommend Cacti or Moonin. Those are both pretty good as well.
Yeah. Okay.
For just monitoring network traffic, not other stuff, I also use routers2.cgi, which is a nice interface. It's MRTG is doing all the work, and then this program just draws the graphs.
You ever played with What's Up Gold? I mean, if you're talking like
I saw it when I worked at the power plant, and it was configured to play different wave files when different servers went down, and that's basically all I knew it as. And one of the things when I was a kid kind of learning computers was I was actually trying to build something like it in Visual Basic 6.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
But my problem was I could never make anything that would extract useful data out of my Unix machines. I had all these FreeBSD servers, and I wanted to pull like the CPU usage numbers out.
Right.
But I didn't have any clue how to build anything in Unix. I couldn't write C, or I couldn't even write Perl at the time.
What's Up Gold is, I think, it's mostly a Windows solution. So if he didn't mention. I asked him in the chat room how many servers, but he's talking large scale. So if he's talking large scale, because that's what he said there in the IRC, I'd probably say then just buckle down and start learning Nagios. And I guess, Alan, if there was one thing you could have known when you started with Nagios that you know now, what would that be?
Define everything in the host, rather. The way I had done it before, when I did my host groups, was I made a separate config file for the host groups and just listed them out. So I made like a group for each data center, and then I would list off the servers that were in that group. And then I'd list, here's my video servers, and here's the list of servers that are in that group. And I basically ran into scale problems with that eventually.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had just said, hey, inside the definition of server 7 or whatever, say, this is a video server and an edge server, and it's in this data center, it would have saved me huge amounts of pain in the head.
Well, there you go. That's a good tip then. That's a good one. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
All right. So our next email comes from Han, and he's touching on a topic that makes Alan nervous but gives me hope. But who knows if it'll ever happen. That would be mesh internet. He says, hi, Chris
It
and
doesn't
Alan.
make me nervous. I just don't think it's all that great.
It makes me nervous. He says, long-time viewer and big fan. I just read an article about private mesh networks in the Mother Jones magazine, the September plus October issue. I believe the people involved were from Athens, Greece, and in the article they mentioned most people use this mesh network to evade the NSA. I mean, the great uses of our tax dollars that help us fight terrorists, of course. He says the speed mentions were, and according to them, 10 times faster than the commercial internets they already had. I think if you guys did a segment on alternative internet options, that'd be super cool. Thanks again. I'm loving Ting, by the way. I've already converted my girlfriend and my best friend who had a Metro PCS phone. JB fan for life, Han. So, he didn't give us the details on that mesh networking, but I think it was in TechSNAP last week. I was like, mesh networking is never going to happen. We would have seen it by now. Murr! And Han writes in to restore my faith. He says they're saying 10 times greater internet speed.
Well,
A little skeptical on that.
if you go back to the Latvia example, if you shoot a gigabit cable between your apartment building and the next one over,
Yeah.
you can do up to a gigabit, which
Yeah.
you can't do off your home connection. But, so sure, it's faster, but you can't go everywhere. You can only go a couple certain places.
Right.
So if the thing you want to download is on the internet, not on the mesh network, it's not faster.
Right. All right.
So it stops becoming the internet and just becomes a private network.
Hope has been crushed.
Right?
Again.
It's just an extended LAN at that point.
a cool LAN. Actually,
Sure.
a slow LAN.
I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Anyways, our last email of the day comes from T to the Z. He says, hi, guys. Really love the show. I watched TechSNAP Last Quarter Radio Last Unplugged and love them all. My question is, when I browse canyouseeme.org, it actually sees my private address. Some goes for some other show my IP address type sites. However, other sites show my external IP. I'm running pfSense as my firewall. Maybe I've set something wrong. Any ideas? Thanks.
By his private IP, does he mean like 192.168 something?
Yeah.
Because I guess maybe there's some JavaScript in the browser that would show that, but there's no way that could show up on the internet because it's unroutable. There's no way the traffic could be coming from that address.
It's got to be the user agent somehow is supplying that, right? Somehow.
Or, yeah, like in JavaScript, sometimes you can find it, I suppose.
Well, I went there.
I think specifically JavaScript doesn't allow that. Like, I went there from behind my pfSense, and it shows my public IP.
Same with me, yeah.
I'd like to see a screenshot of it showing an internal address because I don't think it can do that.
Proxy?
Like, they're unroutable IPs. There's no way.
Proxy?
Like, if he was behind a proxy and it was showing his real internet IP, it means his proxy configuration isn't right.
Yeah. Is there some way that he could be forwarding that?
If he's behind a proxy, a lot of times proxies will pass as a header the IP of the real client.
Yeah.
Like it's called X forwarded for,
Yep.
and it includes your IP. Some sites might actually show that address rather than the address they're
So maybe he's using
receiving the connection
Squid.
from.
Maybe he's using Squid on the pfSense box, and it's presenting the LAN IP of the pfSense box?
That could be it. That
or-
would be where you would actually see an internal IP is if you were using a proxy like that.
Maybe.
But yeah, again, without more information on his configuration and a screenshot of it actually happening, it's hard to say.
Interesting, though. I saw that one. I was like, well, I'm going to go check mine.
Yeah, well, I tried the same thing just to see.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Because generally those numbers aren't that useful because someone can't connect to that address unless they're already inside your network. Although eventually, if they did get inside your network, knowing the addresses of various machines would make their life a lot faster.
It'd be good for reconnaissance, if nothing else, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can hit the contact link at the top of our website or email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or start a thread in that subreddit. Don't forget, you can also join us live Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and that is 4 p.m. Eastern over at jblive.tv. But Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup were stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show. We'd still like to talk about them, give you some links to read on your own after the show. A lot of these links, some of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv and voted on by our community. Alan, the first Roundup story goes to me this week. And good or bad news, I suppose. The Tor project has seen a big growth, especially in August. It has doubled in August alone. The Tor network traffic has, that's a more than 100% rise in the number of users connecting to it for the month of August, reaching record levels for the first time since the project has been collecting statistics on this. Yeah,
the interesting thing was a big jump of about 500,000 new clients happened in less than a week, and nobody knows exactly why.
It's got to be the NSA stuff.
Yeah, but it happened like a week ago, not a month ago.
You know, remember a couple of weeks ago?
Part of it was that pirate browser or private browser that came out.
Yeah,
and a couple of things.
That's true.
There's also some speculation that certain new laws in Russia are causing more and more people in Russia to pick up on it. But it seems like to double that quickly, it seems like there's a botnet or something.
Error. I wonder, too, there was that story about the FBI that was tracking people's activity on Tor by taking advantage of like a JavaScript flaw or something, if I recall, right?
Right, it was actually a flaw in the older version of Firefox that was bundled in that browser.
And that got a ton of play. Maybe that, you know, like they say, all PR is good PR. Maybe that, I mean, a lot of sites covered that story. All right.
Yeah, or it could also be, you know, that since this is basically all of a sudden the network doubled, you kind of wonder if it's kind of like, I know it's not the same concept, but remember there was always that concern with Bitcoin of somebody having more than 50% of the pool being able to fork the blockchain to undo a transaction or something.
Mm-hmm. I had the same thought. It's
if the NSA or the FBI or somebody wanted
just brought on a bunch of exit nodes.
Well, these aren't exit nodes, these are clients though. But be able to try to map the Tor network somehow by having half of all the clients belonging to them.
I guess if it's a 100% increase, that's
But then again, you know, if it was the FBI or something, they probably wouldn't very easily be able to get clients from a distributed amount of places. Like they couldn't have their IP space would be noticeable at some point.
Yeah.
But I guess Tor itself doesn't know necessarily your IP, so it'll be interesting to see if we find out if it was just a mistake or if it was legit users or if it was somebody doing something nefarious.
Yeah. Well, if you're an iPhone user, prepare yourself for the possible crash.
Even OS X.
Okay.
So Apple's OS X and iOS are vulnerable to a new exploit for Cortex, which is the Apple font rendering framework.
Yeah.
Certain specially crafted strings can crash an application, which doesn't seem like all that bad of a thing. Somebody sends you something and it causes the program to crash. Although, if you send someone an SMS message containing one of these strings that will crash the font system, it will crash the iPhone messaging app, and you won't be able to receive new messages. And then the app will restart, and then it will crash again immediately because it sees the message again.
Wow.
So that will completely disable your ability to send or receive SMS messages.
Remember that story we covered recently where on the Mac, if you typed in a certain series of characters, it would crash the application? And then people in our chat room were doing it during the show, and it was crashing their chat program? You remember that? Because it was like the auto-replacer function. I mean, file. Yeah, that's what it was. They're doing it right there. File : //. You know, what the hell is Apple's problem with the text parsing? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, but it's just interesting that it could actually be a denial of service attack against the messaging app or email app or anything, right? So yeah, if you send this SMS message to somebody, then it will crash their SMS app and they won't be able to send or receive SMS apps or messages because if they restart the app, it'll just crash again immediately. The researchers were publishing this after they gave Apple 6 months and they still haven't fixed it.
Oh, really?
So Apple's known about this problem for 6 months and they haven't fixed it yet. Kind of makes me want to just mass blanket this SMS message to every possible phone number and just disable the SMS on every iPhone until Apple fixes it.
Yeah, I know.
Apparently, iOS 7 beta and the new Mac, whatever it's called,
Mavericks.
it's like not a cat,
Mavericks, yeah.
Aren't vulnerable, but there doesn't seem to be a patch for the older versions.
Screw you guys that are running our current operating system. Screw you guys. How dare you not run our beta operating system to get this fixed? Well, good news for you FreeBSD users who've been wanting to try out BitTorrent Sync. The BitTorrent Sync project has announced it is now available on FreeBSD, which opens up the door for free NAS, as we've been hearing from our audience. So that's good stuff. They crossed the 2 petabyte milestone as well. So they've been transferring lots of data. They do note in here that they are, when you do an update, when you're checking for an updated version, Sync does send some anonymous statistics that they use to kind of gather how Sync is performing and the data that's been transferred and size of folders and things like that. But they say it's all anonymous. But it's nice that they admit it. So there you go right there for FreeBSD. Get your hands on it. Okay, Alan, so we've got a video in the roundup this week.
Yeah, this one it was in the bottom of an email. I tend to get recruiting emails sometimes.
From Google, where they're like, hey, check out our data center.
Well, no, it was more like, hey, would you want to come work for us? And then in the signature, there's like, here, to our data center.
So, yeah.
I got one from Facebook and Google and Symantec and Netflix and so on.
I wonder if we're going to get pulled for showing these jerks. But here's a Google data center office, which looks very googly.
But somehow apparently they were touring the data center in Street View. That
is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Look at that. And then they went in and got cool crane shots, too. That's pretty neat. So we'll link that to folks who want to check that out. It's tons of server porn. I feel like if I play the whole thing, we will get a pull. Oh my gosh, look at that! Oh, they have some really cool shots in this video, Alan. Oh my gosh! Oh, that's the servers at the racks. Cool. There's all their servers. Look at that. Oh, that's kind of a rack, actually. It's more like a server with a tray. That's how they do it. Then the power hookups are on the side of the rack.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Well, the last story in the roundup this week is kind of a big one. In a historic vote, New Zealand bans software patents. A new major patent bill that passed in a 117-4 vote by New Zealand's parliament after 5 years of debate is banning software patents. Wow. Processes will still be patentable if a file computer program is merely a way of implementing a patentable process, but patents claims that cover computer programs as such will not be allowed. I wonder how Microsoft feels about this and some of the others.
Some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's a sign of what's to come.
You think?
And not an oddity.
I hope you're right, Alan.
I don't know. Yeah,
maybe.
I'm right as well.
I think maybe we might very likely 20, 30 years down the road look at New Zealand as the first that figured it out, that software is the expression of an idea.
Yep.
Very good. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast, Alan. And TechSNAP.
It does.
TechSNAP is a show for the people. We open our hearts to you and bring you into our chat room. And we invite you to join us every single Thursday live at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Pow! Over at jblive.tv for the video. And when it's working, jblive.info for the audio. We've been having some service issues, but hopefully by the next episode it'll all be resolved. So if you've tried it in the Android apps recently or from your desktop and have been having problems, my apologies. Hopefully that'll be solved very, very soon. And come back here next week for BSD Now. Probably,
which will be on Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Right. Now
2 p.m. Eastern, which is 11 a.m. Pacific, or 1800 UTC.
Now that'll be when it's live. The first release will be out after a couple of days because the intro isn't actually getting made until the show's done.
Yeah, basically to make the intro, Chris is going to have to cut clips from the episode, so we can't do that until there's an episode.
Right. So it'll probably be like Thursday or Friday that the first episode comes out. So we might even get TechSNAP out the door and recorded before it's actually posted. So we'll give you a heads up though. And if you subscribe to the All Shows RSS feed, you got nothing to worry about.
We'll show up there as soon as it is ready.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.